It
Yeah,
was
I'm quite happy to talk about the industry. I've got lots of strong views.
it was really excited. Okay, I want us to talk about a little bit of these topics about the smartphone industry and the wearable industry, like smartwatches,
Sure.
and I think you can give me couples of answer about these questions. I have a lot of questions today for you.
Brilliant. Good. Okay. Well, happy to help.
Okay, but first of all, I want you to tell us about you and what you doing at CCS.
Okay. Sure. Hi there. My name is Ben Wood. I'm the Chief of Research at CCS Insight, and I've been in the mobile industry for over 20 years. My role is to oversee all of the research we deliver to our clients around the world. And my particular area of expertise is devices, be that tablets, smartphones, wearables, or anything else that gets connected. And there's going to be an awful lot of those types of devices in the future.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So, how do you see the future of smartphones in the coming years?
Well, we've reached an interesting time in smartphones right now because we've really kind of ended up having a dominant design. The kind of product like this, where it's a device with a touch screen, a camera, as thin as possible, and probably running either iOS, therefore being an iPhone, or the Android operating system. And of course, we have two manufacturers that are dominating the market, Apple and Samsung, and a number of big Chinese companies like Huawei and Xiaomi and Lenovo are also making great progress in the marketplace. But the smartphone market is very different to how it was, say a few years ago when we had a lot more diversity in the market. People were experimenting with different form factors, and we went through a whole decade of experimentation until Steve Jobs announced the iPhone and really kind of showed the world what a smartphone could be.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the future of Samsung? Do you think Samsung will leave the Android to go build a phone on their own operating system?
I hear a lot of negative stories about Samsung, and I think a lot of the people who are commentating on Samsung sometimes forget that Samsung is still the world's biggest mobile phone manufacturer. They make more phones and sell more phones than anybody on the planet. Absolutely, it's tough for them, but unlike other manufacturers like HTC and Sony, Samsung are making money. They have double-digit profit margins, which is much better than most other players. So Samsung has a tough challenge. They had a misstep last year with the all-plastic Galaxy S5, but the S6 and the S6 Edge are really, really nice devices. And although they face incredibly strong competition from Apple with the iPhone 6, 6 Plus, and 5C, Samsung are trying really, really hard to deliver products that will appeal to consumers.
Okay. So, do you think it makes the company look good if they continue building their devices on the Android operating system? Because there's a lot of phones that you can buy as low as $100, and it's gonna have the same operating system as Android, and it's easy to use. Do you think?
Well, the challenge for Samsung is they'd probably like to have their own operating system, and of course they've been experimenting with Tizen for years, but the commercial reality is that Android is a very, very dominant platform. It's the most prolific computing platform on the planet. There's huge support from the developer community, and creating your own platform and the ecosystem that goes around that platform is extremely tough. You can ask the guys at Microsoft or the guys at BlackBerry, both who are companies that had a proprietary operating system. So you've got the Windows Phone operating system and also the BlackBerry 10 operating system. They have really, really struggled with developer engagement. And for consumers, it's all about the apps. They want to be able to access the services that they want on the device that they have. And for Samsung, that basically means supporting Android. But Android has been good for Samsung. It's helped them grow their position in smartphones. Nokia is the case study for the company that decided to go in another direction. They decided not to use Android and adopted Windows Phone, and they paid a very heavy price for that. But you are completely correct to say that the challenge with Android is that the barriers to entry are very low, and of course there's lots of companies making Android devices, and that puts more and more pressure on Samsung in terms of how they differentiate the products they're delivering.
So what do you think about what do you think about the relationship between Microsoft and Nokia?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's been a huge week in terms of news for the Microsoft and Nokia devices assets. That was something that they bought, and they spent an awful lot of money buying that acquisition, buying that company. And the devices business was a cornerstone strategy for the previous CEO, Steve Ballmer. Obviously, under Satya Nadella, he's decided that hardware is not such a central pillar to Microsoft's future. And unfortunately, that's resulted in the job cuts that we've seen. Most recently, 7,000 or so jobs, but many thousands of jobs before that. The challenge that Microsoft faces, however, is it's signaling to the market that the commitment to Windows Phone isn't there as much as it was previously. And when, as already discussed, they were struggling to have developers support the platform, even with the volumes and the commitment from Microsoft and a few others, now it looks as though the volumes are just going to diminish. And although I do expect there to be another Lumia device or a Windows Phone device later this year, probably a flagship device, I think you're not going to see any significant growth in the platform in terms of volume in coming years, and that's bad news for Windows Phone.
Well, I think they're doing better on the European market than the United States market. I think no.
That's true. I mean, certainly in Europe, we've seen Windows Phone being quite relatively popular compared to the US. In the US, iPhone have a tremendous stranglehold there, but also Samsung, LG, and a few others. In Europe as well, Windows Phone has been very popular for people who were switching from a BlackBerry, particularly business users, where you can buy an entry-level Lumia device. Or you can buy 6 entry-level Lumia devices for the price of a basic Apple iPhone 6. So you can see that businesses looking to deploy mobile phones to their workers found Windows Phone very, very attractive. But I think that Microsoft needs to watch out, because there's a lot of effort going on to make Android more of an enterprise credible platform. You've seen Samsung being very active in that area with the Knox platform, and of course more recently Google with Android for Work, which allows some of the enterprise mobility management and device management capabilities that businesses would look for when they're deploying devices. So net tough outlook for Microsoft at the moment.
Okay. So what would you advise the Microsoft to do it to be able to push the Windows operating system, or to make it more easier to use to be able to compete with Android? Because I think that Microsoft was paying too much attention on the PC and laptops than on the mobile devices. It seems like they were sleeping while Apple and Google was doing a great job behind.
Well, I actually think the strategy has changed at Microsoft. They're not as determined to be a huge player in smartphone hardware and the smartphone operating system. And you can see that because now you can get great versions of Microsoft Office on iOS-powered iPhones and on Android devices, and you don't need a Microsoft phone specifically anymore. Now, Microsoft will want to demonstrate the continuum of experiences across Microsoft platforms, and Windows 10 is very much designed to scale from PC to tablet to phone, and you have adaptive applications that allow you to do that. But the problem is it comes back to developer support, which is, are people going to make the investment to create a specific version for Windows Phone? And I'm not sure that that's going to happen. And I think that Microsoft at the same time is saying it's very important that we have people engaged on our software platforms and our cloud platforms and service platforms. So Microsoft Office, Bing, Azure, Skype, and those sorts of platforms. And by offering that across all mobile phone, smartphone platforms, so across Android and iOS, that gives them much, much more reach than the less than 3% market share that Windows Phone devices currently have, which equates to around 50 million smartphones in a market when 1.5 billion devices will be sold this year, 2015 alone.
Okay. So let's go talk about BlackBerry. What do you think about the BlackBerry devices?
Well, BlackBerry's pivoted its business. It's decided that it's moved completely away from the consumer market. It wants to be an enterprise platform supplier. Its devices business is very small now, around 1 million units a quarter. It's not the strategic part of the business anymore. The future is on having enterprise-grade software, software and management platforms for users, spanning not only BlackBerry devices but all devices. And of course, there are constant rumours about BlackBerry looking at using Android possibly as a base platform for some of its services as well. I have no information on whether that's true or not, but certainly it would be an interesting development and would show that maybe BlackBerry has recognised that maintaining its own operating system is no longer a viable approach in the very long term.
Okay. So, what do you think about the smart watches? Do you think that Google might come with their own watch, like Apple Watch, Samsung Watch, LG, Motorola? What do you think about it?
Well, the smartwatch market is really, really interesting. I'm using loads of these devices. There's a Sony one here. I've got one from Basis. I've got the Apple Watch on this wrist. I've got the Pebble Time. In fact, I've got about 20 different smartwatches that I've been using over the last 2 years. My assessment is that this is the very beginning of the journey. It's a bit like mobile phones back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when the market was experimenting about what these devices would be. Now, I'm seeing an awful lot of news and rumours about Apple Watch being a flop or a failure, and I find these quite difficult to understand. I certainly accept that Apple Watch probably hasn't hit expectations in terms of numbers, but even if they've sold 2 or 3 million devices already, that's the most successful smartwatch of all time. And if they go on to sell multiple millions of devices this year, that's a business which is worth a few $1 billion. And companies like HTC, who lost $250 million in the last quarter alone, I'm sure would be delighted if they had an Apple Watch they could sell. What about the market? I think it's still very much a category where it's kind of a solution looking for a problem. There are some nice things about smartwatches. The fact that you can see who's calling you, get updates, text alerts, notifications from social media, those sorts of things. That's quite interesting. However, it's not. It doesn't really change my daily life. Interestingly, today or this week, Apple Pay has launched here in the UK, where I'm based, and that's certainly an area where you start to see added value on top of the watch itself. You can tell the time, it can tell me who's calling, but when I can actually tap and pay for something in a store, that adds something that does make my life a little bit easier, and it's faster than getting my wallet out of my pocket and selecting the card that I want to pay with. So we're at the beginning of a journey with wearables. Personally, I think most of them are pretty poor right now. I don't think we've found the applications that really resonate with consumers and can help them justify the purchase of the device. But I think that it's too early to write the category off, and I think we're going to see some interesting developments in the future.
Okay, so you don't think that we can use our smartwatches to browse a web page? Because I think that's going to be very complicated. If you want to browse a web, like let's say you want to browse to CNN.com through a smartwatch device, it's going to be very complicated.
No, I mean, and that's not what smartwatches are designed for. If I want to access CNN on my smartwatch, I want to have a CNN app, and I want to be able to push a button and see it. Or alternatively, I want to have push notifications. So right now on my Android watches, or my Android Wear watches, or on my Apple Watch, if something happens and it's on the BBC or it's on the Wall Street Journal, I get a notification on my wrist telling me that there's breaking news. If I want to read that in more detail, well, then it allows me to open a window on my phone and see that. So, my view is that applications like browsing, trying to replicate the smartphone on the watch, is not the correct way to go. It's trying to add value over and above the smartphone. When does the smartwatch become so easy to use that you don't even bother getting your phone out of your pocket? That's the secret sauce I'm looking for.
So what do you think about ZTE?
Oh, well, I think it's probably more interesting to talk about all of the Chinese manufacturers rather than ZTE specifically. ZTE obviously is a company that's been working hard to establish itself in the market. I understand that once again they've said they want to be a top 3 player. They have the advantage of being a China-based manufacturer, and that means that if you're successful in your home market, you can almost guarantee you're a top 10 mobile phone supplier worldwide. But I would say that there are other Chinese manufacturers like Huawei, Xiaomi and Lenovo who are perhaps more interesting than ZTE right now.
Okay. So what do you think about LG and HTC? Is there any...
Well, let's start with HTC. I think HTC are in a really tough spot. They just announced their earnings. It looks as though they're going to lose $250 million this quarter. That's a huge hit for the company to take. The M9 device was a very nice device, but it wasn't that differentiated from the previous model, the M8. And it's increasingly difficult to see how HTC recovers. And it's a very sad story because the HTC One devices, whether it's the M7, the M8 or the M9, are all beautifully engineered devices. And I think it's a confirmation that even if you have the best device, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can hold market share. So I'm very nervous about what the future looks like for HTC. Turning to LG, they're doing a pretty good job. They've made a decision that they don't expect to be in the top 5 players all the time. But they're happy to make great products, target certain markets like South Korea, the US, parts of Europe, and drive enough volume to make sure that the business is viable. But again, it's tough for them in face of the dominance of Apple and Samsung because there's not much market left after those two guys have taken their share.
Yeah. So how do you think? How do you imagine the new the iPhone 7 or iPhone 6s, whatever?
Well, no one really knows, right? I think the most likely scenario is that we'll see the iPhone 6s, I'd imagine, but that's only based on what we've seen in the past. Apple have a highly successful winning product today with the iPhone 6 and 6s. The 6 Plus. The 5C is interesting. I wonder if we're going to see a 6C, and that could be a device that would allow Apple to push deeper into lower price points. Not dramatically, but even if it moves the entry-level price by $20 or $30, that puts a bit more pressure on other manufacturers. But your guess is as good as mine in terms of what Apple's next device is going to be. They keep it pretty secret.
Yeah, that's how it is. Nobody know. Okay, I'm very excited for having Ben Wood as a guest today, and I think I have all my questions answered. So I'm just gonna go post it on YouTube and see how the public will appreciate this interview. I think they will learn a lot about it.
Well, thank you very much, Malik. It's great to be working with you guys, and I look forward to future discussions, and I hope people enjoy the conversation. So have a great day, and talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you very much, Ben.
Okay,
See you later.
bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.